You enter a realm of spirit, of sight and sound and mind. Your radio is a cosmic doorway, and your psyche begins to spark. When you tune in to Gary and the Sun and Night Dreams After Dark.
Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show. Good evening or morning, depending on your time zone. From the Pacific to the Atlantic to you worldwide. Get yourself a cup of Java and find a comfy, easy chair. And get ready for Gary and his guest on Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark.
I like
And
that
now,
After Dark part.
Here's Gary.
That is me, and I couldn't resist. I just love that After Dark part. James, are you still there?
Yes, I am still here. I'm happy and looking forward to the show.
Okay, well, let's get our guest on here. So I'm going to, if you hear the ringing, that's because I'm going to get the guest on, I guess. Hopefully the guest hasn't forgotten.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm looking for Matt. This is Gary from Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark.
Hey, Gary, this is Matt.
Yeah. Boy, your phone is really distorted. Are you on a cell phone or in a bad location?
I am.
Well, let's see if I can adjust it here. Let's see. Okay, let's see if that made any difference. So, hey, Matt, you staying out of trouble this week?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, that helped. I adjusted here on my controls and made you sound a little better. Why don't you tell the listeners what you do for a living and what you about these abandoned buildings and about your book, and then we'll get into, what you do.
So I travel around the country photographing closed historic theaters, mostly now, but when I started out, I was shooting abandoned asylums as well. And I have a new book coming out November 5th called After the Final Curtain, America's Abandoned Theaters, and it covers 20 theaters from coast to coast.
Interesting. How long have you been doing photography?
For, almost 20 years.
Oh, wow. I started, two things I started out young doing. One was getting behind a microphone. The other one is I discovered a camera when I was like about 5, 6 years old. And by the time I was like 7 or 8, I had a dark room in our garage. And, I love photography.
Yeah, I don't remember this, but my mom says it's pretty much the same thing for me. I was about 4 or 5, and she brought home a camera from work, and I just took to it.
Oh, yeah.
And I really haven't been, especially now with cell phones, haven't had one, been far from one since.
Well, what got you into, doing old abandoned buildings and old theaters? What gave you the thought of doing that? Well,
so when I was young, I grew up in the 80s, and you can kind of imagine as a young 80s kid what my favorite movie might have been, which was Ghostbusters. And so I had a very curious grandmother who, anytime she saw an abandoned building when she was she probably did this without us, but when she was babysitting me, if she saw an abandoned farmhouse or an old house, she would pull over and try to go inside. So as a young kid, that was something that I always thought was, oh yeah, you can do that. It's an old house. What's in there? I want to see. So it was a lot of curiosity. And then originally built into the fact that I was so interested in the paranormal. I was just constantly reading books on ghost stories, watching movies. When I first started going into these buildings, it was with a friend to try to search for ghosts.
Oh, wow. Did you run across any while you were going into these old buildings?
I have a couple, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I have a couple stories that could be a ghost. But I haven't run into anything that I would say, like, definitely I saw this. And, there's a hospital in Massachusetts, Foxborough State Hospital. It's actually condos now. And I was in there, I believe it was around Easter in 2004. And I'm walking down a hallway, and, it's all falling apart. There's stuff everywhere, chairs, patient records, clothes, the paint's peeling. And I hear the sound of a door, kind of creaking, moving back and forth. And, okay, someone else is in here. I'm going to go see who that is. So I walk over to the door, and as soon as I get to it, it slams shut. Someone's playing a prank on me. So I kick the door open. No one's in there. And I just thought that something that was a weird thing. And I go into the next room, and I'm just looking around, seeing what's in the place, taking a couple pictures, and I see on a shelf, there's a pair of old nurse's gloves. The ones that go up to about your elbow?
Oh, yeah, the old ones, yes.
White gloves, yeah. Yeah, folded in an X with a nurse's hat on the top of it. And covered in dust. It must have been there for like 10, 15 years at least. So I moved them, thinking, that's pretty cool. As soon as I put them down, the door slammed shut again. So I'm like, okay, what is happening? What's going on here? So I go over to the door. I try to push it open, try to make the creak noise again. Nothing. A friend of mine comes up because he heard the door slam, and I was like, check this, let's see this door. I can't make it. It was creaking, and now I can't make it creak. He touches it once, it just makes the noise again. So to me, the window was probably open a crack, and maybe some wind came in and got it, and that was why it was opening and closing. But I disturbed some old nurse's gloves, and the door slammed. To me, that it's not proof, but it could go either way.
Well, that would scare me. Now, also, we have James out there. James, you got a question about that with him you can ask?
Yeah, did you have any bad feelings? Did you get anything caught on film at all when you were there?
I wasn't recording. So the exploring old asylums, you always kind of feel, you don't feel bad, but they always have sort of like not a dark, but like a sad presence, because if you know the history of them, you know how people were treated in some of these places. I always felt that going in, and I don't know if that was just because of that or because of the actual, if there was something there.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, Matt. Some of them asylums can be dangerous. Like you say, there's always sad feelings and stuff, but sometimes there's some really, really negative stuff hanging out. I just think it was drawn there by the abuse, maybe from patients on other patients, doctors to patients, all the craziness that went on there. But have you ever had anything follow you home from one of them places?
I had a psychic tell me once, ask me what I did. Because she said, I do something very unique because I have a lot of followers. And I didn't know what she meant by that. And she said, and I told her, I photograph abandoned buildings. And she said, well, they're, the people who are spirits that are left behind, and they see you as a bright light, and they follow you out. They don't mean you harm. They're just wanting to escape, and they'll fade away eventually.
That's an encouraging thought. I'm sure. Did you start looking over your shoulder after that?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thanks. I took a break from exploring for a little bit because of that.
Well, a lot of people don't realize some of these old mental hospitals. I can't think of the name of it. Maybe, James, you might remember. There was one that got recently busted because what was going on is that they had a crematorium. They didn't keep track of the patients that would die. They would just cremate them and basically throw their dog tag in a box. And literally, years later, after they closed up, they realized there was thousands of people through all the years that were there that died, and there was no record of them. And their ashes were just dumped out on the grounds of the hospital. And that is scary. And then there's been some of these hospitals that got busted because people died, and they just buried them with unmarked graves on the property.
So I think you might be thinking of Oregon State Hospital, where a lot of people were cremated and they weren't claimed. And after, I think, a wing closed, they went into, and I could be misremembering this exact story, but they found like a closet just full of urns.
No, this one actually, this one was featured on one of the cable channels a couple of years ago. It was so bad that, that the little bracelets they had on the mental patients and stuff, that when they died, they just kind of like threw them in a box. They didn't even keep paper records. And that was the point where they all of a sudden discovered a couple thousand people over the years of the hospitals in existence died. And, a lot of them, they didn't have loved ones, or loved ones didn't care anymore, or whatever. And there was no closure. Or there was one of them they didn't get busted, but they found out they were burying people on the property on unmarked graves. They just buried them. And again, you go in a place like that, I got a funny feeling there's these spirits that's floating around. I don't know what you think about, James.
There is. There's a history and a pattern of all these atrocities throughout many different states. There's one in North Dakota that you touched on that did that. They didn't keep records. They just buried them out there, just threw them out there. They didn't care about them. They even went as far as pulling all their teeth if they even thought they was going to bite, one of the people that worked there. If they did bite them, they'd pull all their teeth. I mean, how cruel would that be? Being tied down and pulling all your teeth without any anesthetic either. I mean, it was cruel stuff.
And then they actually even would put people in. Well, we're talking about in the 1800s. So, in some of these hospitals, kind of started around there and survived to like the 30s and 40s and 50s. But there's been cases where they actually even put people in cages, and they were in the mental institution pretty much all their life, and they could never stand up again. And could you imagine all the pain, the suffering of these people? And then when they started figuring out, shock treatment, that was a cure, wasn't it? They sit there and torture people. I mean, you go into one of those places, you couldn't pay me to go into an old abandoned mental hospital. I just don't have the courage to do it.
They're not as they're not that scary. At least I'm probably jaded because I've been to a lot of them. But at least they're not scary to me in that sort of way. I've never really felt that kind of negative